and the 6 Reasons for Liberty. So what I'm going to talk a little bit about now is some of the modernization paths that can help you get to adopt liberty within an organization. So just to kind of take an overview first of why people modernize. So a lot of it boils down to for what your business wants. Can you keep up with the pace that the business requires in terms of the features of your application? And if that's falling short, is it because of your technology choices or the architecture of your application that might be causing that? So if the architecture is hindering you from being able to add the functionality, it might be because the app is, has fragile parts, or there are some of your technology choices are giving you constraints that don't make it easy to change the application. And then the other thing is, is it extensive to maintain and extend? So are you running it on older hardware? Is the middleware an older version of the middleware that is out of support or getting near its end of support date? Or are the skills that are required to develop or operate it getting harder to find and therefore more costly? So when we talk about modernizing, we think about your existing investments in those applications, being able to unlock the value in them, and having them take advantage of the hybrid multi-cloud. So whatever your choice of public cloud infrastructure might be, having the ability to move workload across it, using a hybrid layer, and being able to have flexibility within your licensing of your software to let you move from on your on-premise infrastructure to take advantage of that. So there is, of course, applying the ability to retain it on where it is. If there isn't a modernization case, you may be doing version-to-version currency already. But the aspects of modernizing or migrating to the cloud that we'll talk about we'll break them into 3 categories. That is modernizing the operations, modernizing the runtime, or modernizing the architecture of the application. So these break down into 2 kind of categories. So are you doing a lot of the motivation from modernizing can be to reduce costs? So are you using the right edition of WebSphere to get cost reductions and through software licensing savings? So if you're running it on the right, only the edition that you need, you're going to free up capacity, license capacity, and you're going to, if you're running it on lighter editions, you're going to get the savings in terms of hardware that Graham was talking about earlier, and you're going to be getting it ready for containerization. Modernization, on the other hand, talks about containers and microservices, and that is driving at things like density, being able to move it into whatever cloud you want to run it on, being able to deploy it in a consistent way, and getting more agility. So with WebSphere Hybrid Edition, of which Liberty is the key feature, you get that ability to have both of these scenarios covered. So just to tease out a little bit again those dimensions that I'm talking about. So you have on one hand a desire to increase innovation for your business by being more agile, and on the other hand you have a desire to keep cost and complexity under control and keep your operating expense down. So when you modernize your operations and your runtime, getting your technology right, that's going to help get your costs, keep your costs managed, and modernizing the architecture of the application along with the operations is going to help you to increase the innovation pace at which you can respond to the market. So this table gives a little overview of that. So when we talk about modernizing operations, we talk about in terms of adopting containers, and then when modernizing the runtime adds Liberty and containers on top of that, and that gives you those cost savings, getting it cloud enabled, a chance to reduce your technical data reliance on old APIs. And then on the right, you have the architecture modernization, what might be regarded as cloud native, agile delivery, microservices kind of architectures for those applications that really want that. In terms of modernization tools, we have Transformation Advisor that's addressing the operations and the runtime modernization part. And we have Mono to Micro that's looking at the microservices and getting more towards the more agile DevOps aspects. So I just want to talk a little bit about what a modernization workflow might look like. That's going to give us an orientation of the tools that we have to help you. So if we look at our WebSphere estate and we think about moving to the cloud, we start off, our solution architect would do an assessment with Transformation Advisor, looking at all the estate and getting an assessment of the applications that are there. And we can find a number of applications from that are going to be simple to move to the cloud. What we mean by simple is that he's going to be able to do it without code changes to the application. So that means that you don't have to involve necessarily the application development team in order to start that modernization project within the organization. So that's containerizing. So what TA gives you is the artifacts that are going to adapt your configuration from WebSphere to Liberty to run that application in a container on the cloud. So if the next scenario then is if you do have the ability to make changes to the application, either that, well, one, you have the ability to change the code, and two, that the timing is right, you've got the buy-in from the line of business for the application, then you can start to look at applications that we call moderate. So moderate applications are ones that have some code changes to make, but they're relatively simple and straightforward to do. And the WebSphere application migration tool that TA bases its assessment on will guide the developer to make those easier changes to the application. So if you are looking at making code changes, then you do have the ability with our new Mono to Micro tool that uses AI techniques that I'll talk about later to decompose the application. So if the application is very large and you are looking to break it up, then you can start that flow at Mono to Micro and do the code changes with WebSphere migration tool, and then have your app move to the cloud. The last scenario is the complex apps. So these apps will require either some parts of the application or the application itself to be rewritten because maybe there's incompatible APIs. But simple and moderate account for quite the vast majority of the applications that you're likely to find. So complex is really about the ones that you either want to refactor, whether a large re-architecture is required, and in which case, you may look at rewriting it. The other option is if the application doesn't warrant that investment in its architecture, is it can be retained where it is, or until it's time to retire it. And just to flesh out the whole scenario, some applications can be replaced by SaaS equivalents, or maybe a portion of the application can be replaced by a SaaS equivalent. So just to give a kind of an idea of starting with your traditional application server, where are the options for where you might want to go, and when we talk about the cloud. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, there are two dimensions on which we may move towards the cloud. One is, we're looking at improving the total cost of ownership by driving down costs, or we're looking to improve the business agility of the application. So traditional application servers, have been generally run on-prem. PaaS platforms have become popular over the years to run applications in the clouds. But we're now seeing, the drive towards containers that has come along in more recent years. With Liberty being around since 2012, there has been the opportunity to run, a lighter weight Java runtime in VMs, and that's something, the density and all the other things that Graham talked about that help to drive down the costs. But then we start to look at containers, and Liberty being an optimal runtime for workloads in containers because of the ability to right size it and just enough runtime for your application needs. And what we have over here is, some of these, there's also the opportunity to run microservices for those applications that do want that high level of business agility. Lastly, just to flesh out the container story, is there is the ability to run the traditional WebSphere application server in containers. And therefore, there are options for how we move between these things over time, and different apps and different groups within your organization may be running at different rates and paces. So one thing we can look at is, for people who are thinking of going all the way to the cloud for their high impact customer apps, is they can move from traditional application server into Liberty and containers, and then and then start to adapt techniques to break that up into microservices. We can look at moving our PaaS applications into those. And a lot of them, if there are microservices already, can be moved up into that top box, or if there were a little bit bigger and traditional in nature, they can run directly as a single application in containers and gain the DevOps benefits without taking on the additional microservices complexity. In terms then of the choices over here on the left, you can. Some people might want to go into Liberty and VMs first, or some people might want to do containers first, depending on whether the container strategy in the organization where that is at. And then find their way into Liberty and containers as a second step. So Transformation Advisor is what's facilitating that, and it'll help in the indirect routes as well. And Mono to Micro is our new tool for applications that you want to peel off pieces of the application's microservices, or add new microservices around the Modernize that. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tools now. So I'm going to talk about Mono to Micro, and then I'm going to be handing over to Dana and Cindy to talk about Transformation Advisor and WebSphere Application Migration Toolkit. So, as I mentioned, Mono to Micro is about being able to break up monolithic applications. So we've got some AI smarts that can identify components of the application that are cohesive and coupled together, and use that to figure out how to break it up into microservices. It's available now on WebSphere Hybrid Edition, fully supported, and the link is there, and we'll give out those links as well at the end of the presentation. So how does Mono to Micro work? So it takes, we instrument the application itself and give the information about the runtime trace of the application, what use cases it's running, etc., to the AI. And the AI uses machine learning and clustering algorithms to figure out how to group them into the partitions that we show here. And these partitions will form business logic scenes that we can use to break up the application and look to run them as independent components. So I'm just going to switch my screen share now to show a little demo. Okay. So this is the Mono to Micro UI. I made it a little bigger to make sure everybody can see it. So the UI itself is very responsive, and easy to use. So what I'm showing here first is a view of it understands. We've instrumented the code itself, so it understands the relationships between the different classes in the application, and they're shown here. Classes are dots with dependencies between them as edges. Over here on the right, we see the different types of analysis that we have. So we have the natural seams, which showing it's saying 5 partitions have been identified, and I'll jump to that in a second. So I can jump to it here. And what I see is it has grouped the classes into five different partitions here, 4 with the unknown. And this is looking to do it so that there is minimal cross-partition calls as possible. But of course, this doesn't take what the application does into account, and this is what we use the business logic view for. So the business logic view has more interpartition calls, but it takes into account the use cases that have been run on the application to generate this analysis. So this is likely to be more coherent to the way that having one use case for each microservice. So given these two different views, an architect has the ability to fully customize it the way they would want to within this view here. So if I turn on the edit graph functionality, then this becomes editable. So I can expand and collapse each of the different groups to see what's in them, for example. What I see here is so far there's a two-way calling between these two partitions. So if I'm looking to make it into a more client-server relationship, I can look in here and I can see that the arrows for this class are going out, and the arrows for all the other classes are coming in. So I can look to move this particular class into this partition, and now I have this partition here calling this partition. So if I like that better, then along with everything else, then this can be my final view of the way I want to break up the application, and then I can proceed to the code generation step. So I'm just going to switch back again now. Okay. So next step is the code generation. So once we have the partitioning set up, then Monitor Micro will spit out the project structure for each of the different partitions and put in the code that's required to enable those partitions to keep communicating, even though they're now running in different containers. And so this keeps the application exactly the way it is, but breaks it up into separate containers, and you can use your existing test cases to continue to test the application as you proceed in the refactoring process. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dana